"You're a fraud. No airline would let someone that young fly," the passenger shouted, demanding security remove the teenage pilot. "I'm calling the FAA to report this." But minutes later, when their aircraft lost all hydraulic systems, this fraud pilot's emergency call would expose why the world's most dangerous airports specifically requested him by name. The real story was about a humble passenger treated as economy class who then revealed as airport owner. Yes, that will be with you in our next video. Captain Alex Mitchell had grown accustomed to the stares, the double takes, and the inevitable questions that came with looking 19 while commanding commercial aircraft carrying hundreds of passengers. At 23, he possessed one of the most extraordinary records in commercial aviation, though his youthful appearance consistently led people to assume he was either lost, impersonating a pilot, or participating in some kind of publicity stunt. The morning sun cast long shadows across the tarmac at Denver International Airport as Alex walked toward gate B47, his captain's uniform crisp and professional, his flight bag containing certifications and credentials that told a story most people would find difficult to believe. He had learned to carry extra documentation because gate agents, security personnel, and passengers regularly challenged his authority to command commercial aircraft. Alex's path to the cockpit had been unconventional from the beginning. While most commercial pilots accumulated flight hours through traditional routes involving flight schools, regional airlines, and gradual progression through co-pilot positions, Alex had demonstrated such exceptional natural ability and technical proficiency that he had been fast-tracked through every level of certification at an unprecedented pace. His journey had begun at age 16 when he had enrolled in an accelerated aviation program designed for gifted students. His instructors had immediately recognized that Alex possessed not just technical skills, but an intuitive understanding of aircraft systems and flight dynamics that typically took decades to develop. By 18, he had accumulated more simulator hours and emergency scenario training than pilots with years of commercial experience. The Federal Aviation Administration had created special provisions to allow Alex to pursue commercial certification ahead of normal age requirements, recognizing that his skills exceeded standard benchmarks for pilot competency. His written examinations had achieved perfect scores across all categories, and his practical flight tests had been completed with performance ratings that instructors described as exceptional. But credentials and test scores couldn't change the fact that Alex looked like a college student rather than a commercial airline captain. His smooth face, slight build, and youthful energy consistently triggered assumptions that he was too young, too inexperienced, or too immature to be trusted with the lives of hundreds of passengers. Flight 847 from Denver to Miami was scheduled to depart at 8:30 a.m., and Alex arrived at the gate area 45 minutes early, as was his routine. He preferred to conduct thorough pre-flight preparations and review weather conditions, flight plans, and aircraft maintenance logs with meticulous attention to detail. His systematic approach to flight preparation had become legendary among airline operations personnel, who often used his procedures as training examples for other pilots. As Alex approached the gate desk to check in with ground operations, he noticed the typical reaction from airline personnel who were meeting him for the first time. The gate agent, a middle-aged woman named Patricia Collins, looked up from her computer screen with obvious confusion. "Excuse me, are you looking for someone?" Patricia asked, assuming that Alex was a passenger seeking assistance rather than the captain scheduled to command the flight.
Richard Pemberton, a business executive in his 50s who traveled frequently for his consulting firm, was the first to voice the concern that several passengers were feeling. "Excuse me," he called out to Alex, "are you actually the pilot for this flight?" "Yes, sir. I'm Captain Mitchell. I'll be commanding Flight 847 to Miami this morning," Alex replied, maintaining his professional demeanor despite the challenging tone of the question. "This is ridiculous," Richard said, loud enough for other passengers to hear. "You look like you should be in college, not flying commercial aircraft. I'm going to speak with the gate agent about this." Other passengers began to take notice of the conversation, and several approached to voice their own concerns. Margaret Ashworth, a real estate developer who considered herself an expert on airline operations because of her frequent travel, was particularly vocal in her objections. "I've been flying for 30 years, and I've never seen anything like this," Margaret declared. "Airlines have safety standards, and putting children in charge of passenger aircraft clearly violates those standards. Someone needs to report this to the authorities." Alex remained calm as more passengers gathered around, their concerns escalating from whispered doubts to vocal demands for his removal. He had faced similar situations before and had learned that responding defensively or emotionally only made the situation worse. "I understand your concerns," Alex said, addressing the growing group of passengers. "I'm fully certified and qualified to operate commercial aircraft. My credentials have been verified by the FAA, and this airline's safety department has approved my assignment to this flight." But his reasonable response did little to calm the growing unrest among passengers, who had convinced themselves that they were witnessing a dangerous breach of aviation safety protocols. Richard Pemberton had already approached the gate desk and was demanding that Patricia Collins explain why a teenager was being allowed to pilot their aircraft. "You're a fraud. No airline would let someone that young fly," Richard shouted, his voice carrying across the gate area and attracting attention from passengers at neighboring gates. "I'm calling the FAA to report this. Someone's going to get people killed." The commotion had grown loud enough to attract airport security, and 2 officers approached to investigate the disturbance. Alex found himself in the familiar position of having to prove his legitimacy to authorities who were inclined to assume that the passengers' concerns were justified. Officer James Rodriguez, a veteran airport security supervisor, had dealt with various passenger disputes over the years, but he had never encountered a situation where passengers were claiming that their pilot was too young to fly. He approached Alex with professional skepticism, prepared to resolve what appeared to be a case of someone impersonating airline personnel. "Sir, I need to see your identification and any credentials that authorize you to be in that uniform," Officer Rodriguez said, his hand resting casually on his radio in case backup was needed. Alex produced his pilot's license, his airline identification, his medical certificate, and several other documents that verified his authority to command commercial aircraft. The officer examined each document carefully, comparing photographs and checking expiration dates. "These appeared to be legitimate," Officer Rodriguez said after completing his examination. "But I have to ask, you do look extremely young. How old are you, and how long have you been flying commercially?" "I'm 23 years old, and I've been flying for major airlines for 3 years. I know my appearance is unusual for a commercial pilot, but all my certifications are valid and current." The security officer's verification of Alex's credentials should have resolved the situation, but the concerned passengers were not satisfied with official confirmation of his qualifications. They had formed a mental image of what a competent pilot should look like, and Alex did not match their expectations. Margaret Ashworth approached Officer Rodriguez with the confidence of someone who she was sure understood aviation safety better than the experts. "Officer, I don't care what those papers say. That boy is too young to have had the experience necessary to safely operate a commercial aircraft. This airline is putting profits ahead of passenger safety." Other passengers voiced their agreement with Margaret's assessment, creating a chorus of demands that Alex be removed from the flight and replaced with a real pilot who looked old enough and experienced enough to be trusted with their lives.
Patricia Collins, the gate agent, found herself in an unprecedented situation. She had verified Alex's credentials through multiple channels, confirming that he was indeed a legitimate airline captain with an outstanding safety record. But the passenger uprising was unlike anything she had experienced in her 15 years of gate operations. "Ladies and gentlemen," Patricia announced over the gate area's public address system, "I want to assure you that Captain Mitchell is fully qualified and certified to operate this aircraft. His credentials have been verified by multiple authorities, and this airline safety department has complete confidence in his abilities." But her announcement only intensified the passenger revolt. Richard Pemberton had contacted the airline's customer service department on his cell phone and was demanding to speak with someone in management who could explain why they were allowing a teenager to pilot commercial aircraft. Alex understood that the situation was escalating beyond normal passenger concerns and was becoming a crisis that could delay the flight and potentially damage his professional reputation. He made a decision that would demonstrate why airlines worldwide sought his services for their most challenging operations. Alex pulled out his phone and placed a call to a number that very few people in the aviation industry had access to. The call was answered immediately by a voice that carried the authority of someone who held one of the most important positions in American aviation. "Captain Mitchell," the voice said, "what can I do for you?" "Director Walsh, I'm at Denver International dealing with passenger concerns about my age and qualifications. Could you provide verification of my status for the gate agent and security officers?" "Absolutely. Put me on speaker." Alex activated the speakerphone function and held the device where Officer Rodriguez, Patricia Collins, and the nearby passengers could hear clearly. The voice that emerged carried the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to making decisions that affected the entire aviation industry. "This is Director Margaret Walsh of the Federal Aviation Administration's Flight Operations Division. Captain Alex Mitchell is one of the most highly qualified pilots in commercial aviation today. He holds advanced certifications that exceed standard requirements, and his safety record is exceptional." The gate area fell silent as passengers absorbed what they were hearing. Director Walsh continued her explanation, providing details that began to reshape everyone's understanding of the young man they had been demanding to remove from their flight. "Captain Mitchell has been specifically requested by name for emergency operations at some of the world's most challenging airports. His technical skills and decision-making abilities under pressure have been recognized by aviation authorities in multiple countries. Any airline would consider themselves fortunate to have him commanding their aircraft." Richard Pemberton, who had been the most vocal critic of Alex's qualifications, stood with his mouth slightly open, trying to process the information he was hearing. Margaret Ashworth looked stunned, realizing that her confident assertions about aviation safety had been completely wrong. Director Walsh concluded her verification by addressing the broader issue that had created the confrontation. "Age and appearance are not indicators of pilot competency. Captain Mitchell's qualifications speak for themselves, and I would personally fly with him without hesitation. I recommend that passengers trust the expertise of aviation professionals rather than making assumptions based on superficial characteristics." After the call ended, the gate area remained quiet as passengers grappled with the realization that they had been wrong about Alex's qualifications. Officer Rodriguez approached Alex with a new level of respect, understanding that he had just witnessed something unprecedented in his security career. "Captain Mitchell, I apologize for any inconvenience. I've never encountered a situation quite like this, but it's clear that you're exactly who you say you are." Patricia Collins also approached Alex with obvious embarrassment about the situation that had developed at her gate. "Captain, I'm sorry about the disruption. I verified your credentials through every available channel, and I should have been more assertive in supporting your authority from the beginning." But Alex's focus had already shifted to the technical aspects of preparing for departure. The passenger confrontation had delayed their departure time, and he needed to review updated weather conditions and air traffic control clearances that might have changed during the disruption. "Thank you both for your professionalism. I need to complete my pre-flight preparation so we can depart on schedule. I'll be conducting my aircraft inspection now." As Alex walked toward the aircraft, several passengers approached him with expressions of curiosity and newfound respect. The dramatic reversal in their understanding of his qualifications had transformed the atmosphere from suspicion to admiration. "Captain Mitchell," called out Dr. Sarah Chen, a physician who had been among the passengers questioning his credentials, "I owe you an apology.
I made assumptions that were completely unfair and unprofessional. Thank you, Dr. Chen. I understand the concern. My appearance does create initial confusion, but I hope our flight will demonstrate my commitment to safety and professionalism. Other passengers offered similar apologies as Alex made his way to the aircraft, but he remained focused on his pre-flight responsibilities rather than dwelling on the confrontation that had just occurred. His systematic approach to flight preparation was unaffected by the dramatic events that had transpired in the gate area. Alex's pre-flight inspection of the Boeing 737-800 was characteristically thorough, involving detailed examination of external components, verification of maintenance logs, and testing of all critical systems. His inspection procedures had been adopted as training standards by several airlines because of their comprehensiveness and attention to safety details that less experienced pilots might overlook. As Alex worked his way around the aircraft, checking everything from tire pressure to navigation lights, he was joined by First Officer Maria Santos, a veteran pilot with 12 years of commercial flying experience. Maria had flown with Alex on several previous occasions and had tremendous respect for his skills and professionalism. "I heard about the excitement at the gate," Maria said, as she assisted with the inspection. "Same old story about your age?" "Unfortunately, yes. But we had some help from Director Walsh at the FAA who provided verification of my qualifications. The situation was resolved without too much delay." Maria shook her head with sympathy. "I don't understand why people can't accept that competence isn't determined by age or appearance. I've flown with pilots twice your age who don't have half your skills or knowledge." "I've learned to not take it personally. The important thing is that we complete our responsibilities safely and professionally. Let's focus on giving these passengers the smooth flight they deserve." As Alex and Maria completed their pre-flight inspection, the passenger boarding process began. The atmosphere had changed dramatically from the earlier confrontation, with many passengers looking at Alex with curiosity and respect rather than suspicion and doubt. The boarding process proceeded smoothly, with passengers settling into their seats and flight attendants conducting their safety preparations. Alex took his position in the captain's seat and began the systematic process of configuring the aircraft for departure, working through checklists that covered everything from engine parameters to navigation systems. But as Flight 847 prepared for pushback from the gate, Alex's exceptional skills would soon be put to the ultimate test. The routine flight to Miami was about to become an emergency that would demonstrate exactly why the world's most challenging airports specifically requested him by name, and why Director Walsh had been so confident in vouching for his abilities. The aircraft pushed back from Gate B-47 precisely on schedule, despite the earlier delays caused by passenger concerns about Alex's qualifications. As they taxied toward the active runway, Alex reviewed the departure procedures and weather conditions with the methodical attention to detail that characterized all his flight operations. Denver International Airport's control tower cleared Flight 847 for takeoff on runway 34L, and Alex advanced the throttles smoothly, accelerating the Boeing 737-800 down the runway with the precision that came from years of practice and natural flying ability. The aircraft lifted off cleanly, climbing into the clear Colorado morning sky as passengers settled in for what they expected to be a routine 3-hour flight to Miami. But at 8,500 feet altitude, climbing through scattered clouds west of Denver, Flight 847 encountered the emergency that would prove exactly why Alex Mitchell was considered one of the most capable pilots in commercial aviation: a catastrophic hydraulic system failure triggered by a microscopic crack in a pressure line that had gone undetected during routine maintenance inspections would test every skill Alex had developed and demonstrate why age meant nothing when expertise saved lives.
The hydraulic failure occurred without warning, beginning as a subtle vibration that Alex's sensitive touch on the flight controls detected immediately. Years of experience had taught him to recognize the early signs of system malfunctions that less experienced pilots might miss until problems became critical. "Maria, are you seeing anything unusual on the hydraulic pressure indicators?" Alex asked his first officer, his voice calm but alert. Maria Santos quickly scanned the instrument panel, her eyes moving systematically across the various gauges and warning lights. "Hydraulic system pressure is dropping rapidly on the number 2 system," she reported. "We're losing fluid fast." Alex's hands moved smoothly across the controls as he began implementing emergency procedures that he had practiced hundreds of times in simulator training. But this was no simulation. They were at 8,500 feet with 183 passengers, depending on his ability to safely manage a potentially catastrophic system failure. The Boeing 737-800 has 3 independent hydraulic systems that control critical flight functions, including landing gear operation, flight control surfaces, and braking systems. The loss of one system was serious but manageable for an experienced pilot. However, the failure they were experiencing was spreading to multiple systems in a cascading failure that threatened to compromise their ability to control the aircraft. "System number 1 is also showing pressure loss," Maria reported, her voice remaining professional despite the gravity of the situation. "This is not a normal single-system failure." Alex immediately contacted Denver Air Traffic Control to declare an emergency and request clearance to return to the airport. His communications were clear and precise, providing controllers with the information they needed to clear airspace and prepare emergency services for their arrival. "Denver approach. This is Flight 847 declaring an emergency. We have multiple hydraulic system failures and are requesting immediate vectors back to Denver International Airport," Alex transmitted. "Flight 847, we copy your emergency declaration," the controller responded. "Turn left, heading 090, descend and maintain 6,000 feet. Emergency services are being notified." In the passenger cabin, the flight attendants had noticed the subtle changes in the aircraft's behavior and were preparing for possible emergency procedures. The passengers, still processing the earlier revelation about their young captain's exceptional qualifications, began to sense that something was wrong. Dr. Sarah Chen, the physician who had apologized to Alex earlier, noticed the change in engine sound and the slight variations in the aircraft's flight path. Her medical training had taught her to recognize when situations were becoming serious, and she could feel the tension building in the cabin. "Is everything all right?" she asked flight attendant Jennifer Walsh, who was securing loose items in the galley. "The captain is handling a minor technical issue," Jennifer replied, following standard procedures for passenger communication during emergencies. "Please remain seated with your seatbelt fastened." But Alex knew that what they were facing was far from minor. The hydraulic failures were continuing to cascade through the aircraft's systems, and he was rapidly losing the redundant safety systems that allowed commercial aircraft to handle single-point failures. "Maria, I need you to run through the emergency checklist for multiple hydraulic system failure," Alex said, his voice steady despite the complexity of the situation they were facing. "We're going to need manual reversion for flight controls." Manual reversion meant that Alex would need to control the aircraft using only backup systems and manual flight control inputs, without the assistance of the hydraulic-powered flight control systems that made modern aircraft easy to fly. It required exceptional physical strength and precise technique that very few pilots had ever needed to demonstrate in actual flight conditions.
"We're getting master caution lights across multiple systems," Maria reported, as warning indicators began illuminating throughout the cockpit. "This is unlike any emergency scenario I've trained for." Alex's training and natural flying ability were being put to the ultimate test. The aircraft was becoming increasingly difficult to control, and he knew that attempting to land with degraded flight controls would require techniques that were not covered in standard pilot training programs. But Alex possessed something that distinguished him from other pilots his age: thousands of hours of emergency scenario training in some of the world's most advanced flight simulators. He had specifically requested training in situations that most pilots would never encounter, preparing himself for exactly the type of emergency they were now facing. I'm going to need to make another call, Alex told Maria, as he continued to wrestle with the increasingly unresponsive flight controls. We need clearance for a non-standard approach procedure. Alex activated his headset and placed a call to a number that connected him directly to the FAA's Emergency Operations Center, a facility that coordinated responses to the most serious aviation emergencies. Emergency Operations, this is Captain Alex Mitchell on Flight 847. We have catastrophic hydraulic system failures, and I'm requesting authorization for manual reversion approach procedures to Denver International. Captain Mitchell, this is Director Thompson. We've been monitoring your situation. You're authorized for any approach procedure you deem necessary. Emergency services are standing by. The conversation was being monitored by air traffic controllers and airport operations personnel, who understood that they were witnessing an extremely rare emergency situation. Manual reversion landings were so uncommon that many air traffic controllers had never seen one attempted. Alex began configuring the aircraft for an approach that would require him to manually control every aspect of the landing process, without the assistance of the automated systems that modern pilots relied upon. The physical demands of controlling the aircraft were enormous, requiring constant pressure on the flight controls and precise timing of every control input. Maria, I need you to manage all communications and monitor our approach parameters, Alex said, as sweat began to form on his forehead from the physical exertion required to control the aircraft. This is going to require my complete attention on the flight controls. In the passenger cabin, people were beginning to understand that their situation was serious. The aircraft's unusual movements and the extended period of flight attendant preparations had created an atmosphere of nervous tension. Richard Pemberton, who had been the most vocal critic of Alex's qualifications, found himself hoping that the young pilot he had tried to have removed from the flight possessed the skills necessary to bring them safely back to the ground. I can't believe I tried to get him thrown off the flight. If what that FAA director said is true, he might be the only pilot who could handle something like this. Margaret Ashworth was experiencing similar regrets about her earlier behavior. I've flown hundreds of times, and I've never felt an aircraft behave like this. Whatever's happening, it's serious. Alex was using every technique he had learned through years of advanced training to maintain control of the aircraft as they approached Denver International Airport. The landing would require precise energy management and perfect timing, with no margin for error. Denver Tower, Flight 847 is configured for manual reversion approach to runway 34L. We'll need the full length of the runway and emergency services standing by. Flight 847, you're cleared to land runway 34L. Wind is calm, visibility unlimited. Emergency services are in position. The approach required Alex to manually control the aircraft's descent rate, airspeed, and flight path without the assistance of automated systems. Every control input had to be perfectly timed and precisely executed, as the degraded flight controls provided very little margin for correction if mistakes were made. 1,000 feet, Maria called out, monitoring their altitude and approach parameters. Airspeed is good, descent rate is stable. Alex could feel the aircraft responding to his control inputs, but the response was delayed and required much greater physical effort than normal flight operations. He was essentially hand-flying a machine that weighed over 150,000 pounds using only backup flight control systems. 500 feet, Maria announced. Looking good, Alex. You're flying this perfectly.
The passengers could see the airport approaching through the windows, but many noticed that their descent seemed steeper, and the aircraft's movements were different from normal approaches they had experienced on other flights. "This doesn't feel like a normal landing," Dr. Chen observed, gripping her armrests as the aircraft continued its approach. Alex was concentrating intensely on every aspect of the approach, making continuous small adjustments to maintain the proper glide path and airspeed. The physical demands of controlling the aircraft were enormous, but his training and natural flying ability were enabling him to maintain precise control. 200 feet, Maria called. Airspeed on target. Sync rate good.
At 100 feet above the runway, Alex began the critical phase of the landing, reducing power and adjusting the aircraft's attitude to achieve a gentle touchdown despite the degraded flight control systems. The landing required perfect timing and precise control inputs that very few pilots could execute under such challenging conditions. The aircraft touched down smoothly on runway 34L, and Alex immediately applied manual braking systems while maintaining directional control using rudder inputs. The landing was so smooth that many passengers didn't immediately realize how difficult it had been to accomplish. "Outstanding job, Alex," Maria said as they rolled down the runway. "I've never seen manual reversion flying like that." Emergency vehicles followed the aircraft as it taxied to a secure area where passengers could be safely evacuated and the aircraft could be thoroughly inspected. The successful landing had prevented what could have been a catastrophic accident, demonstrating exactly why Alex Mitchell was considered one of the most capable pilots in commercial aviation. As the aircraft came to a stop and the engines were shut down, Alex completed his post-flight procedures with the same methodical attention to detail that characterized all his flight operations. The emergency had been resolved safely, but he knew that the investigation into the hydraulic failures would be extensive. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Mitchell," Alex announced over the public address system. "We've landed safely at Denver International Airport due to a technical issue with our aircraft. Emergency services are standing by as a precautionary measure and will be deplaning shortly." The passengers began to realize that they had just experienced something extraordinary. The young pilot they had demanded to remove had successfully managed an emergency that could have ended in disaster, using skills that few pilots possessed. As passengers prepared to disembark, many approached Alex to express their gratitude and amazement at his handling of the emergency. The transformation from skepticism to admiration was complete, but Alex remained focused on his professional responsibilities rather than on personal recognition. "Captain Mitchell," Dr. Chen said as she prepared to leave the aircraft, "I want to apologize again for my earlier behavior, and I want to thank you for saving our lives. That was incredible flying." "Thank you, Dr. Chen. I'm just glad everyone is safe. This is why we train for these situations, so we can handle them when they occur." Richard Pemberton was among the last passengers to leave the aircraft, and he stopped to speak with Alex before departing. "Captain, I was completely wrong about you. I've never experienced anything like that, and I can't imagine many pilots who could have handled it the way you did." "I appreciate that, Mr. Pemberton. I understand your initial concerns, and I'm glad we could demonstrate that safety is always our top priority, regardless of appearances." The Federal Aviation Administration immediately launched an investigation into the hydraulic system failures that had created the emergency. The investigation would eventually reveal that a manufacturing defect in pressure lines had caused the cascading failures that Alex had managed so skillfully. But the investigation also documented Alex's exceptional handling of the emergency, with investigators noting that his manual reversion approach and landing were executed with a level of skill that exceeded anything they had seen in their experience with similar emergencies. Director Walsh from the FAA contacted Alex personally to commend his performance during the emergency. "Captain Mitchell, your handling of Flight 847 was textbook perfect. You demonstrated exactly why we have such confidence in your abilities." The incident also prompted the airline to review their crew assignment procedures and passenger communication policies. They recognized that Alex's age and appearance would likely continue to create passenger concerns, and they wanted to develop better procedures for addressing those concerns before they escalated into confrontations. Alex's successful management of the emergency further enhanced his reputation within the aviation industry. Airlines began specifically requesting his services for flights to airports with challenging weather conditions or difficult approach procedures, recognizing that his skills exceeded those of pilots with much more experience. The passengers from Flight 847 would never forget their experience with the young pilot who had saved their lives. Many of them became advocates for judging pilots based on competence rather than appearance, sharing their story with others who might make similar assumptions about young aviators.
The investigation into Flight 847's hydraulic system failures concluded 6 months after Alex Mitchell's extraordinary emergency landing at Denver International Airport. The National Transportation Safety Board's final report praised Alex's handling of the crisis as exceptional airmanship that prevented a potential catastrophe through superior technical skill and decision-making under extreme pressure. The NTSB investigators had never encountered a commercial pilot who demonstrated such advanced manual flying skills in an actual emergency situation. The techniques Alex employed during the manual reversion approach were typically only seen in military test pilot programs or advanced simulator training scenarios that most commercial pilots would never experience. Captain Mitchell's performance during this emergency represents the highest standards of pilot proficiency, wrote Chief Investigator Robert Hayes in the final report. His ability to maintain aircraft control and execute a successful landing under such degraded conditions demonstrates training and natural ability that far exceed normal commercial aviation standards. The report's technical analysis revealed that the hydraulic system failures had been caused by microscopic stress fractures in pressure lines that had developed over thousands of flight cycles. The failures were so rare that the aircraft manufacturer had never documented a similar case in the Boeing 737-800's operational history. But the investigation also documented something equally rare: a pilot's response to multiple system failures that prevented what could have been one of the deadliest accidents in commercial aviation history. The manual reversion landing that Alex executed was so technically challenging that simulator instructors used video recordings of his approach as training examples for advanced pilot education programs. Dr. Patricia Williams, the Federal Aviation Administration's Director of Pilot Standards, had personally reviewed the flight data recordings and air traffic control communications from Flight 847. Her analysis confirmed that Alex's emergency procedures had been executed with precision that exceeded anything documented in her 30-year career in aviation safety. Captain Mitchell's handling of this emergency will be studied for decades as an example of how proper training, natural ability, and calm decision-making can overcome seemingly impossible circumstances, Dr. Williams explained during a presentation to the International Society of Air Safety Investigators. The aviation industry's response to Alex's performance was immediate and overwhelming. Within weeks of the emergency landing, he received job offers from major airlines around the world, all seeking to add his exceptional skills to their pilot ranks. Airlines that operated in challenging environments, including those serving mountain airports and severe weather regions, specifically requested his services. Alex's reputation had transcended normal career advancement patterns. At 23, he was being offered captain positions that typically required decades of experience to achieve. His emergency landing had demonstrated that competence and skill mattered more than age or conventional career progression. But Alex chose to remain with his current airline, recognizing that his experience could benefit not just his own career, but the broader aviation community. He accepted a promotion to Chief Pilot for Emergency Operations, a newly created position that gave him responsibility for developing advanced training programs and emergency response procedures. I want to use this experience to help other pilots develop the skills needed to handle extreme emergencies. The techniques that saved Flight 847 can be taught and learned, and I believe we have an obligation to share that knowledge throughout the industry. Alex's new role involved traveling to airlines worldwide to conduct advanced emergency training programs. His courses focused on manual flight techniques, crisis decision-making, and the mental preparation necessary to handle situations that went beyond standard emergency procedures. The training programs Alex developed were revolutionary in their approach to pilot education. Rather than relying solely on simulator exercises and theoretical instruction, his courses included real-world scenarios that challenged pilots to think beyond standard procedures and develop the adaptability necessary for unprecedented emergencies. Most pilot training programs prepare you for known emergencies with established procedures, Alex explained to a group of senior pilots during a training session at the European Aviation Safety Training Center. But when you face something that's never happened before, you need skills that go beyond memorized checklists. The success of Alex's training programs led to their adoption by major airlines throughout North America, Europe, and Asia. Pilots who completed his advanced courses reported increased confidence in their ability to handle complex emergencies and better understanding of aircraft systems and manual flying techniques. Alex's influence extended beyond just pilot training into broader discussions about age discrimination in professional aviation. His successful handling of Flight 847 had challenged assumptions about the relationship between age and competence, forcing the industry to reconsider how it evaluated pilot qualifications. The International Air Transport Association invited Alex to speak at their annual conference about the importance of recognizing competence regardless of age or appearance. His presentation to over 2,000 aviation executives and regulatory officials focused on the need to eliminate bias from pilot evaluation and promotion processes. The passengers on Flight 847 initially judged my qualifications based on my appearance rather than my training and experience, Alex told the conference audience. That same bias exists throughout our industry, preventing talented individuals from advancing based on factors that have nothing to do with their ability to safely operate aircraft. Alex's advocacy for merit-based evaluation led to policy changes at multiple airlines and regulatory agencies. Age discrimination in pilot hiring and promotion became a focus of industry reform efforts, with Alex's experience serving as a powerful example of how bias could undermine aviation safety. The Federal Aviation Administration appointed Alex to serve on the National Aviation Safety Advisory Committee, making him the youngest person ever to hold such a position. His role involved reviewing safety regulations and providing input on pilot training standards that would affect the entire aviation industry. Captain Mitchell brings a unique perspective to our safety discussions, explained FAA Administrator Jennifer Walsh. His combination of exceptional flying skills and real-world emergency experience provides insights that are invaluable for improving aviation safety standards. Alex's committee work focused on developing new training requirements for manual flight skills and emergency decision-making. His recommendations led to regulatory changes that required all commercial pilots to demonstrate proficiency in manual reversion techniques and non-standard emergency procedures. The changes Alex advocated for were implemented gradually across the aviation industry, with airlines required to provide enhanced emergency training that went beyond traditional simulator exercises. The new training standards emphasized the importance of developing pilots who could think independently and adapt to unprecedented situations. Alex's personal story had also inspired a new generation of young people to pursue careers in aviation. His example demonstrated that exceptional competence could overcome bias and discrimination, encouraging talented individuals from diverse backgrounds to consider becoming pilots. The Alex Mitchell Aviation Scholarship Program, established by a consortium of airlines and aerospace companies, provided funding for young pilots who demonstrated exceptional aptitude and commitment to safety. The scholarships supported advanced training programs and mentorship opportunities that helped recipients develop the skills necessary for challenging aviation careers. Alex Mitchell proved that talent and dedication matter more than age or conventional expectations, said Dr. Michael Foster, director of the scholarship program. We want to identify and support other young pilots who possess similar potential to contribute to aviation safety and excellence. The scholarship recipients were selected based on demonstrated flying ability, commitment to continuous learning, and potential for leadership in aviation safety. Many recipients went on to successful careers as commercial pilots, flight instructors, and aviation safety professionals. Alex personally mentored many of the scholarship recipients, providing guidance on career development and sharing the lessons he had learned from his own experiences with age discrimination and emergency situations. His mentorship emphasized the importance of continuous training and preparation for unexpected challenges. The most important lesson I can share is that competence must be constantly maintained and developed, Alex told a group of scholarship recipients during a mentorship session. Emergency situations don't wait for you to be ready, so you must always be prepared to perform at your absolute best. 5 years after the Flight 847 emergency, Alex had become one of the most respected voices in international aviation safety. His training programs had been implemented by over 50 airlines worldwide, and his safety recommendations had influenced regulatory policy in multiple countries. The aircraft manufacturer that built the Boeing 737-800 involved in the hydraulic failure had worked with Alex to develop improved emergency procedures for their aircraft models. His insights into the challenges of manual reversion flying led to design improvements that made future aircraft easier to control during system failures. Captain Mitchell's experience with our aircraft provided invaluable feedback for improving emergency handling characteristics, explained Chief Engineer Sarah Martinez. His recommendations have been incorporated into our latest aircraft designs and will benefit pilots for decades to come. Alex's reputation had also made him a sought-after consultant for aviation safety investigations. When complex accidents occurred involving pilot performance or emergency procedures, investigators often requested his analysis and recommendations for preventing similar incidents. The consulting work allowed Alex to contribute to aviation safety beyond his role as a pilot and trainer. His insights into human factors and emergency decision-making helped investigators understand how pilots respond to extreme emergencies. Alex Mitchell possesses a unique combination of practical flying experience and analytical thinking that makes his safety consulting invaluable, explained accident investigator Dr. Robert Chen. His recommendations have improved our understanding of how pilots respond to extreme emergencies. Alex's influence on aviation safety education extended into academic institutions as well. Universities with aerospace engineering programs invited him to develop curriculum components that emphasized the human factors aspects of aviation safety and the importance of manual flying skills. At the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Alex helped design a new course called Crisis Decision-Making in Complex Systems that combined aviation case studies with broader principles of emergency management. The course became popular among students studying engineering, management, and public policy. Captain Mitchell brings real-world expertise to academic discussions that are often too theoretical, explained Professor Elizabeth Walsh, who collaborated with Alex on curriculum development. His students learn not just about aviation safety, but about how to perform under pressure in any complex technical environment.
The academic partnerships allowed Alex to influence the next generation of aerospace engineers and aviation professionals. His teaching emphasized the importance of designing systems that supported human performance during emergencies and the need for continuous training and skill development. Alex's personal life had also been transformed by his professional success and public recognition. The young man who had once been dismissed as too inexperienced to fly commercial aircraft was now recognized as one of the world's leading experts in aviation safety and emergency procedures. But Alex remained grounded in the values that had motivated him to become a pilot. He continued to fly regular commercial routes in addition to his training and consulting responsibilities, maintaining the practical flying experience that kept his skills current and his perspective realistic. "I never want to lose touch with the day-to-day realities of commercial flying," Alex explained during an interview with Aviation Week magazine. "The moment you stop flying regularly is the moment you start losing the edge that makes you effective in emergency situations." Alex's commitment to maintaining his flying skills while expanding his influence in aviation safety had made him a unique figure in the industry.
Few pilots had successfully combined operational flying with training, consulting, and policy development at such a high level. The recognition Alex received for his contributions to aviation safety included numerous awards from professional organizations, regulatory agencies, and international aviation groups. He had been honored by the Airline Pilots Association, the International Federation of Airline Pilots Associations, and the Flight Safety Foundation. But the recognition that meant the most to Alex came from the passengers whose lives he had saved and the pilots whose skills had been enhanced through his training programs. Their gratitude and respect represented the real measure of his contribution to aviation safety. 10 years after the Flight 847 emergency, Alex was invited to deliver the keynote address at the World Aviation Safety Summit in Geneva. His presentation to delegates from over 100 countries focused on the evolution of aviation safety and the challenges facing the industry in the coming decades. The emergency we faced on Flight 847 taught me that safety is not just about following procedures or relying on technology. True safety comes from preparing pilots to think independently, adapt to unprecedented situations, and maintain the highest standards of proficiency regardless of circumstances. Alex's presentation included analysis of emerging threats to aviation safety, including the challenges posed by increasingly automated aircraft and the need to maintain manual flying skills in an era of technological advancement. His recommendations influenced international policy discussions about pilot training standards and regulatory requirements. The summit delegates recognized Alex's unique perspective as someone who had successfully bridged the gap between operational flying, safety training, and policy development. His recommendations were incorporated into international aviation safety standards that would affect pilot training and aircraft certification worldwide. Following the summit, Alex was appointed to serve as special advisor on aviation safety to the International Civil Aviation Organization, a United Nations agency responsible for international aviation standards. The appointment recognized his global influence on aviation safety and his ability to translate operational experience into effective policy recommendations. Captain Mitchell represents the best of what we hope to achieve in aviation safety, said ICAO Secretary General Dr. Patricia Williams. His combination of exceptional flying skills, training expertise, and policy insight makes him uniquely qualified to help us address the safety challenges of the future. Alex's work with ICAO focused on developing global standards for pilot training that emphasized manual flying skills, emergency decision-making, and the ability to adapt to unprecedented situations. His recommendations were based on lessons learned from Flight 847 and thousands of hours of subsequent training and consulting experience. The global standards Alex helped develop were adopted by aviation authorities in over 150 countries, affecting the training of tens of thousands of pilots worldwide. His influence on international aviation safety policy ensured that the lessons learned from Flight 847 would benefit the global aviation community for generations to come. As Alex reflected on his career during quiet moments between flights, he remained committed to the principles that had guided him from the beginning: continuous learning, preparation for the unexpected, and the understanding that every flight carried the sacred responsibility for the lives of passengers who trusted pilots with their safety. The young man who had once been dismissed as too inexperienced to fly commercial aircraft was now recognized as one of the world's leading experts in aviation safety and emergency procedures. His journey from questioned pilot to respected expert demonstrated that competence and character were more important than age or conventional expectations in determining who deserved trust and responsibility.
Alex's legacy would continue to influence aviation safety long after his flying career ended. The training programs he developed, the policies he helped create, and the young pilots he mentored would carry forward his commitment to excellence and his belief that proper preparation and continuous learning were the foundations of aviation safety. The passengers on Flight 847 would never forget the young pilot who saved their lives through exceptional skill and calm decision-making. Their experience had taught them that competence could not be judged by appearance and that extraordinary ability could emerge from unexpected sources. But for Alex Mitchell, the successful emergency landing was just the beginning of a career dedicated to ensuring that other pilots would be prepared to handle similar challenges. His story had become a powerful example of how individual excellence could transform an entire industry, and how one person's commitment to safety could benefit countless others. The aviation industry had been forever changed by a young pilot who refused to be limited by others' expectations and who transformed a moment of crisis into a lifetime of contribution to aviation safety. Alex Mitchell's name would be remembered not just for his extraordinary emergency landing, but for his ongoing commitment to making aviation safer for everyone who chose to fly.